Butterflies return someday. You'll notice that it's not very often that names around men change. It's the names around women and womanhood that changes. Well, that has its reasons. Men who seek power over women often want to define womanhood first, right? That makes sense because first you want to define what it is you want her to aspire to. Because when you control the definition, you control everything. Her behavior, her language, her choices, and her destiny. So let's be clear, very, very clear. Womanhood has never been for men to define. Not yesterday, not today. Not by her husband, if she has one, not by her community, not by political leaders, not by school officials, not by her oppressors, and definitely not by no strangers. Now, historically, men have not only described womanhood, they've tried to define it. Define it! And all the little rules and regulations and the guidelines and the do's and the don'ts. And you must, and you ought to, and you should. Put it in law. Put it in religion. Put it in medicine. Put it in economics. Put it in cultures. To set boundaries for male benefit. Now, one of the main reasons that women do not allow males in spaces where work is being done for women's empowerment, for women's healing, for women's growth, for women's opportunities, is that men tend to attempt to revert back to this when they come into your group. They want to tailor the group or the work around themselves. So they get in too often, and women and girls are frequently told that they aren't doing something right and don't know enough, and that the woman's intuition or that gut feeling that women often rely on, it's reframed as psychosis or, mocked or ridiculed in some way, even though that's a survival tactic for most of us, and the reason we're still here. Now, we will acknowledge this. Not every man has or does hold equal power. Not every man. But when institutions were doing the defining, and it was always overwhelmingly controlled by men and for male benefit, some male somewhere, and to cater to male feelings. So let's go through those 10 ways just to remind ourselves. Number 1, woman as men's legal dependent. Under coverture, a married woman's legal identity was absorbed into her husband's. She could lose control of her wages, her property, her contracts, and even her legal standing. Womanhood was defined as, for generations, defined as dependence, while manhood is treated as authority. Let me take a break here because I'm speaking about the West, and we always need to remember that there are so many places on this planet Earth in 2026 where women don't even have this freedom. Don't even have this freedom. Number 2, woman is wife and mother first. Women were told that marriage and motherhood were not simply possible parts of life, not just possible, but your natural destiny, your duty. Education, work, ambition, sexuality, and public leadership All that was judged according to whether they served men, husbands, and children. Now, I told you all, and I put it in the post on We Survive Abuse. I told you all that the first woman in America who ran for mayor ran because the men ridiculed her. She was married. The men ridiculed her. We have done a post on her, Susanna Madora Salter. She was married and she had kids, and so the men thought that was funny. How dare a woman want to be in charge? And she did run, and she won. She won, and she only held it for one term because she did that to prove something, not just to them, I think more importantly to herself. And then she left with her husband and her children and went on with her life. Number 3, woman is naturally unsuited for power. Here we go. Men denied women the vote, public office, professional licenses, higher education, right to own land, right to rent apartments. You'd have a landlord and they wouldn't rent to working young ladies. It wasn't seeming, they'd say. Civic authority by claiming women were too emotional, delicate, dependent, or morally pure for public life. The contradiction was obvious. Women were supposedly too weak to govern, yet strong enough to carry families, farms, working in the fields all day, factories all day, and communities, taking care of their children, other people's children, but unsuited for power. And that's why we have women like Shirley Chisholm, who was a trailblazer and ran for president. She left us with some beautiful quotes. So when these guys are telling you, I see them doing it now, so interesting, telling you who the feminists are and who was telling you right and who was telling you wrong. Oh, I wish people would stay in their lane. Oh, but they don't. And particularly when it's a woman. She left us with some beautiful quotes. In the end, anti-black, anti-female, and all forms of discrimination are equivalent to the same thing: anti-humanism. You should see the lessons she learned. There's this beautiful woman, strong. You should read about the lessons she learned when she ran for president and what she learned about a lot of people. Number 4, woman is biologically irrational. Male-dominated medicine often treated women's anger, grief, sexuality, resistance, pain, and distress as evidence of hysteria. Instead of asking what had happened to women, doctors would frequently define womanhood itself, womanhood, just the state of being a woman, as unstable and disordered. Now, for centuries, predominantly male medical authorities interpreted women's pain, sexuality, anger, grief, and it was valid, trust me, resistance through theories centered on uterus, having a uterus, and female instability. The diagnosis of hysteria became a way of describing and often controlling women whose behavior did not fit accepted expectations. I told you, the Western medical community made up the term drapedemonia. Enslaved peoples were running away from torture. And they gave it a diagnosis as if That was the part. Now that's the part that is something wrong with, not what you're doing. No, that's not unusual. It's treatments for hysteria included isolation, lobotomies, enforced rest, hypnosis, and physical interventions. That has not gone away. Even if the words have, women's pain is often dismissed as stress or a need to lose weight. Speaking of, we've done a post here about Elizabeth Packard, who had her children and everything taken away from her because she dared to stand up to her husband in academic rigor. She's like, I'm just as smart as you. He was a minister and made sure she was sent away to institutions. And having lost everything, it would have been very easy for her to just give up. But she did not. She didn't give up. She fought for other people. She fought for better laws. And she fought for what she had seen. She fought for the people she had seen mistreated along with her in those institutions. So, like I said, I hear them telling y'all things like, you haven't read this feminist person and you haven't read that feminist person. Know this. It was always more than 15 or 20 or 100 women who were fighting against oppression. It was armies of women, grandmothers, mothers, unseen, unrecognized, and erased. So I'm just giving you some names. And we should acknowledge these folks, but know this. It was a lot of folk, and if you talk to the people in your neighborhood, in your family, in your communities, you'll hear so many fascinating stories about how women fought against oppression, and you'll get some great lessons. So let's move on to number 5. Woman is sexually pure or sexually corrupt, one or the other, right? Patriarchal cultures divided women into false categories. Hear me, false. Respectable woman or fallen woman. Wife material or not wifey, right? Men were permitted sexual freedom, the ability to be dynamic. Like in one lifetime, there could be 50 different people. Evolve, change, be something different. Something women weren't permitted to do. Punished socially, legally, or violently for having knowledge about their bodies and pleasure and desire and pregnancy or victimization. Just the knowledge. Number 6, woman as obedient. A good woman was often defined as agreeable, quiet, forgiving, self-sacrificing. She will erase herself. And submissive. Now, by contrast, a woman who set boundaries, challenged abuse, rejected marriage, or spoke with authority could be bitter, unnatural, unfeminine, dangerous, or a mad woman. Number 7, woman is unpaid labor. Domestic work, caregiving, childbirth, child rearing, emotional support, and community care were labeled as women's natural duties rather than labor. Defining service as femininity allowed families, employers, churches, and governments to benefit from women's work. Now think about that. Even today, the service work, the work that is so hard to do, the caregiving, the childbirth, the domestic work, the child rearing, are the lowest paid fields. Lowest paid. Now let's move on to the woman as an object for male evaluation. Even today, beauty standards chart, beauty standards. Now, that's different from is she beautiful? Someone sets a standard and decides what is and is not. That's man-made. Taught women that womanhood had to be proven through attractiveness to whom? Men. Body treated as public property, something to judge, rank, sexualized discipline, cover or uncover, enlarge or shrink, whiten or reshape entirely for male feelings about her body. Number 9, black womanhood is laboring, exploitable, and less deserving of protection. Now, this is that thing where people say black women were denied, femininity to respectable white women. And they say it, though, with a leash attached. Some signs and some leashes attached. It's not just, it happened. And oh, goodness, let's go reclaim. Let's go talk about what our grandmothers went through. Let's let's make this right. Let yesterday make today better. No, it's a call for black women's labor and further erasure and silencing. Of course it is. See, under slavery and segregation, racist male power portrayed black women as endlessly strong to justify the conditions that they were suffering under. That's what it was about. It was justification. That, of course, she was available and accessible because the things that we're doing to her, we want to justify that. Naturally, serving. That's just what they do. That's who they are. Look at some of those tapes with folks who were racist and were under that whole cult-like, horrible, possessed way of thinking and how they justified it. Aggressive and incapable of innocence. And when you hear these things, people sling them at women today and say, here, this is what happened, without context, without informed context. They just picked it up like a rock and used it as a weapon. These myths justified forced labor, the violence against women, the violence. And let's unpack that just a bit. When you talk about the violence, that means her inability to speak up and say, hey, this is what happened to me. But if you justify and say, hey, they're naturally like that, then she doesn't get any justice and she doesn't get heard. To justify family separation, dehumanizing, to justify medical abuse. They don't feel pain. To justify the refusal, outright refusal, to protect black women from all of these things. Enslaved black women were expected to perform exhausting labor, while being denied the delicacy and protection associated with white womanhood. This is true. So later stereotypes such as endlessly loyal, you'll see that because folks still sometimes come to your community expecting loyalty with nothing. No offer on the end. Well, what do I get? Oh, nothing. You just think I'm just here I understand. You bought into the myth. Self-sacrifice and mammy defined black women according to what white households and institutions wanted from them. The stereotype helped romanticize and justify. Keep in mind, when people pick that thing up and come at you with stuff, you're like, you're the same. You're doing the same stuff. Still dehumanizing. And finally, number 10, because this is exhausting just to record. Imagine what being a woman is, to live it. Here in the West, there are some shackles that are undone. Some. And yet, we will never forget our sisters who can't even get online. Number 10, woman is whatever preserves male authority. This is the deepest pattern right here. Definitions of the proper woman changed when male power needed to change. And that always happens. There's always going to be when male power needs more. You would think that it would just say, oh, okay, well, we're just going to change, what the top does. That's what we're going to do. No. It's going to change what proper woman means. So she was weak when she sought authority, but strong when labor was required. She was irrational when she protested, but responsible when everyone needed care. Isn't that something? Naturally maternal when child care was unpaid. Naturally, this is what y'all do, right? Y'all take care of the children. But unreliable when she sought professional leadership. She was sacred when men wished to control access to her body. But disposable and unheard from when she reported male violence. And that tells us something very, very important. The historical struggle over womanhood has never been only about words. That's there. It's key. So yes, when people want to change a definition around an oppressed group, your antenna should be up. Why? Who does this benefit? So yes, that. But it has been also about who controls women's bodies, her labor, her sexuality, who she dates, who she doesn't date, who's seen as acceptable to date, who's seen as not acceptable to date, her movement, where she goes, her resources. When they take resources and they say, no, we're going to take these and we're going to give them to the men too. Really? Red alert. Her political voice and her right to say, no, women are not costumes. We're not stereotypes. We're not services. We're not, objects of your fantasy or supporting characters. We're not a supporting character, support character in men's lives. Women are human beings with the right to define ourselves, speak out about material reality, about our lives, how things impact us, just as women, to establish boundaries around you too. Who says I shouldn't establish the boundaries around you? See, you're the first one. You're going to be the first one. And build institutions around our own needs, especially our need for survival. So, listen, none of this is new. When women go against male control, you're expected. They're going to call you names. They're going to punish you. And they're going to try to exclude you. Because why? It's always been done. Women's resistance has often begun by declaring that first and foremost, our womanhood belongs to us. Not to our husbands, not to doctors, not to any lawmaker, no. Not to a faith community, not to advertisers, and not to people who have assigned themselves as the cultural gatekeeper. Us, because we're the ones who have to live this life. Women at all times. We got to live this life. We have to go through these institutions. We have to walk through these communities. We have to walk through this life as women. The question is always, who benefits from the definition and what happens? See what happens to women who refuse it. That's what you look for. Men who seek power over women. Not just men who seek power, but men who seek power over women. Often look for them to define womanhood first. Because when you control the definition, you control so much. Let's be very clear. Womanhood is not now and never has been for men to define. Not by a husband, not by a community, not by our oppressors, not by strangers. We define ourselves. We decide what it means to be a woman. We speak the truth. Speak the truth whether people approve of it or not. Oh, let's be safer. And let's let that include especially women. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. Be great. This is Tanya G.J. Prince. Thanks for listening. Y'all be great.